Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. He's well known to SAG members and an expert in this area. Please welcome Grant Slinger, who's the Chief Operations Officer at IQX Business Solutions. Thanks, Grant.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. I hope you can see the presentation here. And look, I'm very excited to talk about today's topic. And I really appreciate all your valuable time here. And today, we really want to share with you what IQX has learned in its journey with supplier onboarding. We've built a lot of these processes, custom portals and SAP Fiori portals. So we've learned a lot over the years. And today is really a chance for us to share that with you so you can get some really good takeaways from this session about supplier onboarding and the things that you should look out for in a solution and how you can use that information to help solve some of your challenges. I think picking this topic will become obvious when we really jump into it and as we talk through some of it. So I'll just get right into it. We will include a demo of the solution and we will cover the important topics. So I think it'll become good and obvious as we get through the process here today with you. So supplier onboarding is challenging, right? It's not such an easy process just to automate and get end to end. And it often ends up being a process where there's manual onboarding forms and email only engagement for everybody, suppliers as well as your business and all the different participants in the process, data custodians and accounts payable processes, etc. And we see that. I mean, I'm intimately involved in onboarding for IQX when we get new customers, and there's a lot of manual processes still out there. The other thing we also see, and this is again from personal experience, is really quite inconsistent application of risk across the process. It may be the case that there's identification of, say, cyber risk. We will often get simple one-page form to fill out. We'll get complex manual forms to fill out, intermediate online risk assessments, and we've even had 5,000 questionnaire that starts out with 5,000 that we've had to complete, and it's not always directly aligned to the exact services or solution you're providing. So that is a challenge. The other challenge we see is just really collecting and managing certificates, things like insurance and workers' compensation, cyber insurance these days. We see that being done quite poorly generally. Classic example is getting an email 3 months after the expiry of our certificates to supply the updated certificates. So it is a challenge to manage that well. The other challenge is really, yes, you may have some tools on the front end side, some forms, some automations, some portals. You may have a big product in front of SAP, but it's still a challenge to get good quality, seamless, well-managed integration into SAP. Any solution you consider should cover that. And at the end of the day, the impact and the challenges around time, this is taking everyone's time because the processes aren't great and they're slow and inefficient. But that's not only what's happening with supplier onboarding, because the compliance demands are just growing out there. It really is a changing environment, and we as businesses are going to be asked to perform more and more compliance, and that all compliance extends to our suppliers. Classic examples, health and safety. You really want to make sure you've got that covered before you're getting some on-site services. And maybe your onboarding process should be a two-step with a pre-qualification to clear that hurdle before you go to a lot of work on the back-end side. So it's really focusing effort at risk, I guess, is where some of this is heading. These compliances around reporting on ESG, modern slavery and child labor, and that are growing. we've seen that you basically can't get onboarded if you're providing any IT touch points to customers these days as a supplier, unless you've been through some type of cybersecurity assessment. So that's becoming almost mandatory. And then there's a lot of newer things and other things that are coming, particularly when you're talking around your major suppliers like sanctions, money laundering, and risk screening around those things. There may be global ones that you have to apply that get brought across to the country-specific stuff, but there may also be country-specific. I was seeing Austrac the other day, who's a financial intelligence agency for anti-money laundering and counter, and they've got exposure drafts out now about new rules that are coming into play. You know, do we have to worry about that? Should you be able to include that into your onboarding process? And really, because of these increasing demands, we're going to need better and better traceability and audit trails in your solution. But what happens if you did nothing? So some of those processes can be quite disaggregated, and I think, you know, delays, as you can see there, delays in the various stages in the process really have opportunity costs. They have potential to really cost you money with lost savings and really cost money with lost revenue on the other side. But is that all? No. You know, there's risk out there. And how are you thinking about that risk? And if you really think of this process, you want to get in front of all of these things, you know, with your vendor onboarding process. It is the gatekeeper to manage yourself through this process and decrease risk and increase your speed and automation. What we're going to jump to now is just an online poll. I think that should come up pretty soon.
Yep.
So let's jump to that. I can bring the questions over the top if you want, or those coming up soon.
That'll come up, yeah, Grant. They're coming up right now, and we're collecting responses. So we'll just keep that open for a very short while. But if everyone can give their the responses, basically you've just got one choice, so only one response. So it's how would you describe your current supplier onboarding process? And it's basically going from the first one, which is completely manual, up to the last one, which is a fully automated and SAP integrated setup or process. So if you could respond. We've got a lot of, actually, thanks to everyone who is responding. We've got a lot of people already. What I'm seeing, Grant, is the most, so that's about 36% are around that, the third one, so semi-integrated with SAP. The next one, pretty close, or around 33, 34% is that some automation. And then about 15% are at completely manual, and about 14% are at the top, at fully automated and SAP integrated. So that's what we're seeing, but we'll stop that one there. Thanks everyone who participated. Grant, is that sort of what you've seen with?
Yeah, I mean, that would kind of reflect what we see directly, both in our customer base and in suppliers. I think in particular this audience, maybe with the title, you know, there may be some bias in the audience, but I think that's good. I think there's lots of opportunity to improve, and hopefully we'll learn about some of the things you should look for as we move forward in terms of improving the process. So this is the question then, what does good look like? What should we be really thinking about? So the first one is this configurable onboarding workflow. So I think you really, with supplier onboarding, there's lots of different things, you know, that can drive the suppliers, domestic supplier versus international. Are they providing a product or services? Are those services remote or on site? Is there something really unique about the type of product or service they're providing? Does it fall into a high risk category which needs specialist attention? What's the size of the contract or relationship you're going to have? How major is this to your organization, or is it, you know, critical supplier? A long lead time, you know, critical spare parts, you just have to order from these guys. So I think that's on the one side, and you have to be able to map these into your organizational structure, your business units, your different roles in your business, be they procurement, who wants to approve before onboarding, or do you want some commercial involvement in that approval decision? Specialist risk category owners need to be involved in the process, like cyber may need analysis by a specialist. And then you get the data type owners, which is really thinking of who's responsible for your master data in SAP, particularly, and they need to be involved in the process as well. So you need good workflow in this process. The other thing we're talking about is we need to make this process easy for your suppliers. So the ability for the supplier to provide the data is key as well. You don't want to double handle this information. It can be collected at source, entered by suppliers, and that really has a saving for all parties. It's got to be simple and easy to use. So you'll be looking at something that's going to guide the supplier through the process. We can't expect a level of competence. You may need to help some of these suppliers through the process. And you want to get accurate data, right? So we want to, where possible, validate the information and, you know, provide type ahead lookup of information into the solution. So really, we've got to provide something that the suppliers can use. So I would be looking for that. And why do we do that? Well, it saves everybody time, reduces work, and you really want to get that quality information up front. This is a topic I'm sure we've all heard lots of. AI, very popular, and really it's not just hype, right? We're going to have to, solutions that you should be looking at should have AI in them. So this is an example of simple AI, and it's just a simple workers' compensation certificate, but you can use AI here. Must do scanning. I wouldn't have a solution that didn't scan attachments. And it's, you know, AI or OCR, but the latest AI is a little bit different from the old OCR. It's a little bit better. It's a lot more affordable, and it's easier to train. So this is becoming much more available. It should really be mandatory. And you can see here, it'll give you an assessment of its accuracy of the information that's pulled off of the relevant documents. So the suppliers don't have to type this in anymore. What comes out of that? Well, a validated loaded document with all the correct information, you know, and it's quicker, simpler, and more accurate. AI can go further. The other real tricky part of supplier onboarding is you're identifying risks. You want to do some work to reduce that risk. So you're often using self-assessment questionnaires, and that has to be completed by the supplier. But the real work is in assessing those. So you definitely be looking for a solution that is using AI to help you with that assessment. It can provide model answers and model attachments that would be nice to have, but imperatively, you probably need the ability to apply your own slant on what you think good is, and then the solution will use those. And it'll come out at the end with a recommendation. It could be a percentage, or it could be just a category like low, medium, high, like you see there. But always we want to say recommended by AI, you know, and I think there'll be an opportunity for, you know, humans to make the final decision, or keep, you know, human in the loop in this process. So I would be looking for AI in my solution. The other thing, I think we've kind of touched on this, because we looked at all the risks that are out there and different types of information we're going to have to start collecting to comply with. And the simple ones, like let's make sure the solution can plug into different solutions or different services for different validations of business and tax numbers. This, you know, you can validate US, you know, tax identification numbers as well, for example. The other big one area that's growing is risk intelligence. So what we've done is just what I've done is just put some of the ones we've worked with down there and added into solutions. So this is all about looking at sanctions, corporate structures, ultimate ownerships, and the financial strengths of an organization. You can call services, and you can think of some other risk areas and other compliance areas where you'll have the same intelligence type process. So you need the ability for a solution to be able to plug in. And particularly, I would say, when it comes to what we've done with, say, even bank verification, you may be plugging into different solutions depending where you are and what banking you're checking, right? So it could be Australia is the best. There could be certain providers better in Australia than in other parts of the world. So it's not one solution is actually got effective coverage in all locations. So I would look for that kind of architecture in a solution. I would definitely look for management of document expiry, and also rescreening or reevaluation of your risks periodically. And here, this one is looking at certificates where you'll do a countdown. The countdown will then go into a workflow to validate the information that's been submitted by the supplier. And then you'll come out with a valid certificate at the end. And this is where you can configure, what happens if they don't do that in time. Well, you can give them some grace time. Configurability here is important, or you could decide to block the supplier from new purchase orders, right? And you really want that automated as well. I see a lot of solutions who talk, and I've seen this many often. Yes, we've got SAP integration. Yes, we've got an add-in. It's all done. But the SAP data model is much deeper than the supplier information they submitted, and all that, getting it extended fully for your organizational attributes is important. There's going to be a lot of mapping you need to do. You saw all the different types up front there. We had our suppliers that you will end up with, and you may want to map that to different data to extend and complete your SAP vendor master record. Even supplier or vendor onboarding in SAP is not one thing. You may have to create a bank key. You may just decide to do that. You may, the bank key may be the responsibility of a different team. You definitely have to create the vendor in SAP and the confirmation. And now, with S4, the vendor process changes slightly, but the solution should be catering for both of those, whether it needs business partner first or not. Also, additional rules. You may want some review from your data custodians where they work every day, which could be an SAP, right? So you may want some of those. You may want some flexibility in your SAP integration to apply different review and approval processes. And really, we want this integration to be business managed. They will have facilities to manage it and not rely on heavily on IT to solve every integration issue. And I think IT certainly would be appreciating that as well. Then this is another thing to think about. So we're talking about how is the solution actually architected under the hood? What can it do? Is it modern and really serverless means you're managing nothing of the solution. Everything's managed for you, which gives you real scaling. Its ability to operate, and connect to third-party apps and provision data to your data warehouses. There's also things you should be looking for, top security and auditability as well. So those things are all important, and you're really I would be looking for something that's modern, performs well, and is cost-effective because of the technology. So we've got to 7, and I think that's where we were. So I had a little question here again, which was just to say, so what do you think would make the biggest difference, to supplier onboarding for yourselves in your process? What features or functions? So
Yep.
We can kick that little poll off.
Yep.
And
okay, great. Yes,
I had to cut them down a bit, but I'm still interested to see which features, where, you know, where some of the weighting ends up.
Sure. Thanks, Grant. Yes, that poll's going out, and I can see people are responding quite quickly. Yeah, and you can, and for this poll, for this question, you can answer, you can give as many responses as you like, not just the one.
You can't pick them all.
Yeah, well, it seems like that. They're all getting about 50, they're all getting pretty much the same, except the only one that's a little bit less was bank account verification, but all the other 4 are almost the same.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yeah, so I think everyone's pretty much given equal weight to all 4 of them, pretty much all 5 of them, I would say.
Okay, so those are things I think to be cognizant of amongst all the things we've looked at as well. They're more clues as to what you should be having in a solution today. Okay, let's now take a look at the solution. So this is the more exciting time for you, demo time. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to quickly make sure we understood some core concepts here. So this solution will obviously have a supplier-facing portal, and like supplier-portal.com, the supplier will log on to that portal. And then yourselves as organizations, you're the customer or buyer, so we call that the buyer portal. And that's where you would be able to request a new supplier, review the certificates, review compliance, carry out all your work associated with onboarding a supplier using the supplier portal. And then the last piece, which is part of the solution, is the SAP integration, which is managed by a full suite of Fiori apps. And we'll get to look at some of that integration as well. So I think we'll see all of these. So hopefully that's going to work well for you. So if we come in here, I'm just reinforcing those points by saying there's the supplier portal, where the supplier gets their data. There's the customer portal. This is internal, would be single sign-on for yourselves to use. And this is getting into your SAP Fiori solution with all your bits and pieces in the back end there. All right, so let's jump in. So before I start this one running, this is the process to invite a new supplier, right? And so you would click invite a new supplier. You can see here, you could have a New Zealand supplier, you get a New Zealand business number. Australia, you get the Australian. So this is the interoperability of services. You're selecting characteristics of your engagement size, entity type you've already got. It can make a difference to how you proceed. You've got questions you can ask. So here, this is on-site services. The guy's going to do some welding for us on site. So immediately you can start thinking of what risks you want to manage here. And it's come out and said, look, health and safety is one, and interestingly, sustainability. And that just depends on the configuration you've got in the solution to drive this type of stuff. So really it's saying, I'm going to ask a few more questions before I submit this onboarding request. And that is just saying that I'm not really, yes, they'll be on site, but they're not really, you know, they have got some controls in place. And then we end up with these documents there that you'll see more of, which we're mandating for them to supply, like workers' comp insurance and health and safety check. All right. So once you've completed that, you can go back and see the supplier yourself as the requester, and you could scroll through and see what's available there. Now what I've jumped to is before we can send an invitation request out, you're going to, and this again talking to the workflow, you would have some process of vetting that you actually want to invite this supplier and that you're happy with the questionnaires and information you're asking of them before you ask them to do that work and then put that work back on yourselves. So now this is, if you look here, it's procurement so it's commercial manager preview of the solution. So let's just go through that. So here we're selecting welding automation again. We can see the risk categories again. We can go through and see the initial questions that were answered. We can see that there's 2 risks there that we're concerned about, and that will then drive us to collect certain certifications and ISOs around safety we're asking for. Yes, this is the questionnaire I want to send out to the supplier. I'm happy with that. I'm happy that we don't have the supplier in because it's already checked against the registration number. It's not a duplicate. So I'm fine to approve this to proceed to onboarding. Now, of course, and you'll see that is now waiting for supplier. So we've now moved from this one through to the supplier, and they can start their onboarding process. So if we go and have a look at that, what will happen is, as you would expect, you get an invite as a supplier. You get invited to the portal. You can follow the prompts, log in. Normal process, nothing too unusual at this stage, but you can see it's already a guided process. It's, you know, it's telling them where to go. It's reasonably simple to complete. The critical data, like, you know, let's just get information like your company letterhead, is type ahead for address, like we're talking about earlier. You can check you got the right place, and then we can keep moving. So now we're going to the next step, which is saying, and you can obviously decide whether you want to enforce multi-factor or not. Bank information, we'll be wanting to check that. So we upload proof of bank. You can have additional proof of bank also mandated as part of the process. And here we're back to certificates. So the supplier now needs to update these. We've requested certain documents, they need to supply them. And again, you can configure, or should be able to configure, is it mandatory to have the document or not? Can you put not applicable as an option and skip it, even if it is mandatory? You know, these type of things are important. Here's what we saw earlier. You're getting some auto scanning of the solution. You've done your scans to make sure there's no viruses, and you may have to enter some data manually. But this has certainly assisted the supplier to get the information corrected into the solution. And some of these can have, again, configurable. So we're not mandating these, otherwise we have to fill in every one as part of these processes. But this is now health and safety. So we're asking the supplier to go through and complete a few questions. And these questions are configurable. You can ask for information, you can mandate attachments, all the things you'd expect with a questionnaire. And you can see all are complete, but yes, I can answer the optional question as well. And that would go through and say, yes, I've completed all the answers. The status for that is pending. I can keep going. I'm reviewing my information. It's just a single screen. The supplier can see everything they've got, and they get the final option to submit their data. And the solution here will decide whether it accepts them at this point, or it makes us know you need to finish those 2 incomplete documents. You'll also notice if you were quick enough, there's a little 2 on the left-hand side next to certificates. That's showing them that they still have to supply those 2 certificates. So they're always tracking that. And if they're curious, they can actually, you know, get some help and just to understand exactly what's going to happen next. Because now they can see their record. But this effectively is now waiting for review. So at this point, it's kind of locked down for them. Okay, so hopefully we've seen that we've finished that step. The supplier is done, And what that means is that we've come back to the buyer portal. So this is now where the compliance officer or the accounts payable or whoever we've configured, and for demo purposes, we've kept this really simple. And this now welding automation is sitting with the compliance officer to execute their part of the process. So the supply officer will come in, they'll review the information. There's no risk assessment as yet because we haven't come to a decision on the information that's been provided. It hasn't been reviewed. But on review, the decision has to be made in terms of the risk, right? So this is not a business decision at this point. It can be, but you can separate these. You may say, look, I've still got a high risk, but as a business, do you want to accept that or not? That's something else to consider with the whole workflow process. All right, so now we've got some evaluations starting to come into the play. And similarly, we can bring, review the information, provide an assessment. And this is where the humans involved here. And we get another score, right? And that's all good. So I'm happy with that process. I can say I'm signing off on it, and we can keep going. So we haven't forgotten about anything for that welding automation. Those 2 certificates we're waiting to collect are still active. And if they don't complete them within the grace periods we've set, even if we've set them up on SAP, they will be blocked. And you can go back and look at the data, and you can see there that the invitation or confirmation of success has come into the supplier. So what's left now? We've got the supplier completed their part. We've completed our review parts. It's actually the last step is we need to onboard the supplier. So this is where SAP comes into play. And you can see here, we've got a suite of SAP Fiori apps on your tile. One to manage the creation of the new vendor. This is to hold all your business rules and approval matrix rules for inside SAP approval for internal users. Delegation, you obviously need something to look out for in workflow. This is changes, like they add a new contact, change address, add a site that will come through there. This is the main monitoring where you can understand the status of all your integrations or requests to create SAP master data, and that's an opportunity to push data from SAP. Say you created an emergency supplier in the back end and you wanted to push that to the portal, you can do it the other way around, which you may have to use from time to time. Here's the monitoring. You can see it's got all the request numbers. So these are all the suppliers you're trying to manage. Some are pushed from the portal. You can see there's change as well as create in this process, right? But what we can now do is we can refresh and see that the welding automation has come through, and that's 1548 there. So this is the one we want to onboard. And if you're an AP clerk, you can work off a work list if it was your job to perhaps verify the certificates, for example. Verify the master data before it proceeded, or as we've done in this case, and this is flexible. So the front side, the supplier portal, is only got configuration. This has even more flexibility. We've disabled the procurement approval checklist there. But look at all the SAP data that's been pulled in, right? And there's the bank information. We put a bank verification step into SAP as an example, that it doesn't all have to be in the one place. We can provide some SAP side functionality as well as the portal side functionality. So this is a really good example of a Fiori app, ingesting that information from the portal and going through a process of verification itself inside SAP. Typically, we would pass the bank account documents and the company letterhead, etc., through to SAP. A lot of people like that either linked or attached in the SAP master record. So off that goes. And now we're at a second step. It's changed to accounts payable approval, not accounts payable check. So it's a new user. So what we also provide is a way to find all your tasks. So here you can find that particular task sitting against me in vendor as a compilation list of all different tasks. Other tasks could be general approval or something else, or create a project approval, CapEx request approval, whatever it is. And then here, again, reviewing the information. Notice this is the confirm step. So when we talk about, and we need a confirm step because we need a different SAP user account for the confirmation process in SAP. So this is where we're talking about dual control and sensitive fields and a separate confirmation step. So that's looking good. In this case, was only configured for two-step workflow. There is views of all the workflow that we kind of missed out there just for time, but you can see all the workflow. You can see it's in SAP integration stage. So that goes into orchestrated integration. And now it's moved to SAP confirmation. So you're able to see exactly where it's up. If it stopped there and failed on confirmation, you would have been able to resubmit it through the application if it was, say, someone had opened the supplier at that time and couldn't get in or something. So there's a lot of, and there we see we've just completed the whole process. It's come, that SAP numbers come back to the portal and it's saying, look, not only are you active, you're actually linked up to SAP. And now we could start pushing information back to the portal like invoices or something like that. Okay, so we've completed the demo. So just really near the sum up time here, looking at what's really important, what are the value drivers for Supplier Online? I think we've got a good idea. So really managing risk. You're going to need to do that with some type of tool. It's not to say you have to manage every risk in the tool. We can punch out and hold a step in the process for where maybe it's gone to a very sophisticated tool that covers a specific risk. But certainly you're going to streamline your onboarding process. And there are some self-service, though we're not talking about today, self-service features. These all help save time, improve data quality, and make things quicker. That compliance automation we saw, that's important. You need to manage your risk around your certificates, currency, or being within the right validity period. And if you've got that automated, it's going to save you time. Also, rescreening will come out of that automation as well. And you want pre-integrated with SAP. SAP integration can be expensive if it's not pre-built. Modern applications need all these things. They need to be delightful, integrate pretty much to everything, but respect SAP as the center of truth. You need good workflow. All those decisions can be mobilized, and security across the environment is obviously really, really important. And lastly, just as takeaways, just for you to think about, this is really thinking that it's important to solve this problem. It shouldn't be so difficult and so hard and be a big decision. It shouldn't be hard and expensive to do, Project lengths don't have to be months and months and months to complete. I think if I was looking at this process, I'd be paying attention to how I could collect more and more compliance and metrics as those requirements grow, because this is getting attention, at high levels in organizations, because they're the ones who carry the risk. just beware of claims that solutions are SAP integrated. You may only be creating the general data view in SAP. You may not be as deeply integrated or as flexible as you would really like. And I think it's also important to find a solution that the business can manage. If you're a business user here, you would love that. But you know, if you're an IT user, you also want to reduce the burden on yourself. So you would like a solution the business can manage as well, I think. So those are my takeaways. I hope today you've had a chance just to learn something as well, and really think about what's important to you as part of this process, and that it'll keep you in good stead in your journey to much better and improved supplier onboarding and I guess general supplier management. So that's where I'll pause here and ask about questions. Any questions?
Sure. Thanks, Grant. Really good presentation and some really good takeaways there. We have time just for a few questions. I do have one here, Grant, that just came through. What happens when a supplier wants to change their ABN?
When they want to change the ABN, you're going to onboard them a second time, would be my advice. I think it is it's another, you know, there has to be, it depends where you want uniqueness in your solution, but I think even SAP, you're going to be thinking you want to have some numbers that respect all the associated information. So I would say if they want to change it, I would simply say, well, we're going to have to onboard you again. Yeah. If it's not that hard, then you know, it can be reasonably seamless.
Right. Next question is, and we get asked this for most solutions. I mean, does it integrate with S/4HANA or all the latest platforms and solutions?
Absolutely. So this works both for S4 and for ECC. The integration for S4 is a little bit different. We're now getting much better APIs that you can actually use for the integration, and they are proving to be quite good. But you've still got the orchestration challenges across, you know, if you've got different data owners for new bank keys, and you've still got dual confirmations in the process. But yes, seamless transition. If you went from one to the other, your solution wouldn't really change or feel much different, but the integration itself would be different.
Great. And probably last question, Grant, but what is a typical implementation timeline?
So it's really not that long. The SaaS solution is there, ready to run. So the front part is really just thinking about the configuration of the solution for your business requirements, and really your risk model. There's configuration there around the risk models, questionnaires, you know, types of service, you know how many additional questions you need, all that information, who your approvers are going to be. So that's configuration. So that's fairly short. Similarly, the way we would approach the integration as SAP is we would stand up that solution suite immediately, and then we would just understand your backend supplier types, you know, then account groups that you're catering for. So that's quite seamless. So we very rarely see any project, even a small, say, custom Fiori build or app we do, less than 3 months duration. So I would say we would have this, you know, typically we can do this style of solution in, you know, that 3 to 4 months duration, you know, of the project. Cool. Then it's not really big consulting. There's not a big consulting exercise here. This is mainly configuring the supplier portal, and then just mapping the Fiori solution, taking the baseline and adjusting it to the customer's exact requirements, and seeing, you know, what they want to manage where really effectively.
Great. Thanks, Grant. We'll have to end it there.